behalf of the Certificate of Sephardic Ancestry, the Jewish Unity Through Diversity Institute, Reconnectar, Sammy, and Jeannie Milgram. We are really excited today to discuss what's in a Jewish name. I had the unique pleasure of meeting virtually Dr. Debby Koren when I interviewed her on her book, Responsa in a Historical Context, for the New Books Network. If you haven't heard the interview, I encourage it. She goes into a lot of detail there, not as much as the book. So I also encourage you to read the book, which you will be getting a code for to order it. And you've already seen it on the first emails. So I definitely encourage you to read it all. I know I really enjoyed it, and I hope you do as well. So just a brief little bit about Debby. You'll hear more from her, but Debby, Dr. Koren, has lectured and taught Talmud and Halacha in various settings. She has a PhD in mathematics from the City University of New York, an MA in Talmud and Halacha from the Schechter Institute in Jerusalem. And like I just said, she is the author of Responsa in a Historical Context, out now by Koren Publishers.
No, it's by ASP, Academic Studies Press.
Why did I write Koren? My sincere apologies.
It's because it's my last name, but I'm not related to them.
Good. So we started off already with an issue, but that's okay. Thank you for correcting me. I appreciate that. That's right. Academic Press. Yes. So thank you all for joining us. Because Dr. Koren usually teaches in an open session, I do encourage you to open your cameras and be part of the discussion. Keep your microphones muted unless one of us say, okay, please answer. So raise your hands, the virtual hand raising, or put a question into chat or Q&A, and we will definitely invite you to participate. In the meantime, we'll have the opening address, and while they're doing it, I will be inviting you to rejoin as a presenter. All that means is you will have the capabilities to open your cameras and your microphones. So we encourage you to do that, but either way, you will have the opportunity to put in your questions, comments, etc., into the chat or into the Q&A. And I was just asked if we will be saving the chat and Q&A. Yes, if there's something there that comes up that we need to send to you, we will have access to it. So that's not a problem. And with that, I will hand over the mic.
Thank you. I do notice a couple of people are having problems with the video or video option. Is that?
Yeah, the video should be working.
That's what I wrote, and I think it is.
Is anybody else having an issue with the?
I think two people said they are.
Right, because if it's two people, then chances are it's on their end. And I don't know how I would be able to help you with it. Yeah, so if most of us have it, then it has to be on your end.
Right. Now
so
I already see 3 people say no video.
No, so Sherry's telling us it's fine.
Okay.
And video should be working. So there are 2 that are saying that it's not.
He's got no video.
But it's like, oh, they can't open their videos. Oh, yes. Thank you very much, Susanna. Yes, give me 5 minutes and I will invite you while Dr. Koren is giving the opening introduction. So I will be monitoring that. Thank you. So when I invite you, please feel free, keep your mics off, please. Thank you. And now I will hand over the mic.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm very pleased to see people from lots of places, and I really appreciate you coming. It's a pleasure to see. So my topic today, I hope everybody read the little abstract and title so that you know what you're coming to. Like on the airline, that this is a flight from, and be sure you're on the right flight. And then that way I don't have to repeat what is in the abstract. The title is What's in a Jewish Name? Questions of Jewish Identity based on crypto-Jewish and Jewish experience as seen in Responsa literature. Now, okay, so what we didn't practice is, how do I move on? Okay, it did move on. I was a little, okay, so I don't know how many of you actually heard the podcast that Drora did with me. She interviewed me, and I explained there a little bit about what Responsa literature is, but I will start out with a quick explanation of that for those people who don't know or didn't hear. I imagine, I can never know for sure, but I imagine that people come with a wide variety of backgrounds, just like you come from a wide variety of places. So responsa are what we call in Hebrew she'elot u'tshuvot, which means really questions and answers, unlike what the term is in English, Latin. So they are questions that are posed to adjudicators, or poskim as we call them in Hebrew, and their responses. It wouldn't include rather basic questions like, you know, can I use this pot after I accidentally put something in it? Those are the kinds of things that rabbis either know the answers by heart or know where to look very quickly. And those are not what we call responsa. They're also, although people sometimes will call what's on the internet these kind of quickie questions to rabbis who usually answer by saying it's forbidden. That's not what I would call responsa either. But they're usually complex questions that we don't have already in the codes, that we don't have precedent for them. And then we need some kind of deliberation, argumentation to provide a decision or ruling. They can be questions from an individual. They can be questions resulting from a dispute, so that there's a plaintiff and hopefully a defendant. Sometimes somebody's got a dispute with someone, but just that person is coming to the Beit Din, to the religious court. The religious court really doesn't have, never has had much power to enforce anything. Excommunication was kind of one of the few things that could be done. And so unless you have two people, defendant and plaintiff, coming together, agreeing to some kind of arbitration, it doesn't usually help very much to get somebody to rule in your favor. The responsa in my collection are all from very prolific and well-respected authorities. Some questions in the Talmud might even be thought of as responsa, but generally the corpus of such literature is thought to begin with letters sent to the Geonim, that's the 7th to 11th century, from Jewish communities far and wide. In this webinar, I'd like to acquaint you with such literature by looking at one responsa that addresses the questions of Jewish name and Jewish identity, as I expressed in the title and abstract of this webinar. And I hope it will serve as a small taste, a little nibble of what can be found in my book, and that you find it interesting enough so that you will want more. The intent of my book is to present this type of material in a manner that's accessible to readers of varying backgrounds. If you know some Hebrew, I encourage you to try to read the original texts and follow along in my translations if you need them. If you don't know Hebrew, then the translations will provide you with the full content. I also provide halakhic background, separate the texts that I think are the most essential to any one of the responsa. And again, these texts, the halakhic background, appear in both English and Hebrew. There are copious notes for those who need explanations of terms and for those who want to pursue some particular topic further. Again, some things are pretty basic in the notes, some things are really for serious researchers. My ultimate purpose is to acquaint people with this vast cultural legacy from the post-expulsion era. This legacy being the vast responsa literature and the rich Hebrew language and erudition that it contains. This is, if we're looking at Sephardic culture, it is a very significant and substantial part of Sephardic culture that not as many people are familiar with. And I think it's really worth becoming familiar with it. What can we learn from it? I have here, well, what can we learn from it? Aside from halakhic precedent that was set, in many cases, the responsa are then cited later in other cases. We can sometimes learn historical events that were happening at the time. We can learn about how people might have been living at the time. We do have to remember that in many cases, the responsa are representative of problematic issues. For example, if it's a suit, if it's a tort, if it's, for that matter, divorce proceedings. This isn't everybody. It's those people that needed to get some kind of advice or opinion or ruling, arbitration. So we can't say because I read about a particular case that everybody had this problem, but some people did, and in many cases, we can get a feel of what it was like at those times. Okay, so a little historical background. Converso's names, and again, in the book, I've got footnotes to just about any statement I make. Converso's names were changed to Christian names when they were converted. The use of Jewish names was used as evidence against someone in the Inquisition. That was one of the types or examples of Judaizing, if you retained your Jewish name. And so if somebody who was a converso returned to Judaism, it was an important aspect of renewing one's Jewish identification. The responsum we're going to look at is written by Rabbi Samuel de Medina, who is known by the acronym Maharashdam, right? It's Shmuel, Moreno, Harav, Shmuel de Medina, and there are no vowels in the Hebrew ones, so they're sort of put in Maharashdam. That's the years he lived. His family was from Castile, Spain, and he was very prolific, 956 responsa that were published. So I'm going to start with a question. Let me lower this so that I can read this out. And I will just tell you what page it's on for anybody who happens to have the book and wants to see it there. Noted it. Yeah, it's on page 142 in the book. Okay, and now I will lower this so that I can read it. Okay, so the question regarding those forced conversos who came from Portugal, and they had names like the Gentile names, but after they came to seek God and his Torah, they would change their names to names of the children of Israel. Note that I have this in italics, names of the children of Israel, with the citation where those words are from. In my book, in order to reduce the amount of quotation marks, I put all biblical phrases. And that's one of the beauties of this literature, is that they just weave into it constantly these phrases from the Bible. It could be sometimes just one word or two words, and they're woven into the very beautiful Hebrew that they use. So, and this is a case, the names of the children of Israel and where it's from. And they have a need to write from the place where they dwell as Jews to the place where they had names like the Gentile names, whether to their relatives or to those who conduct business with their money. Are they permitted to write and change their names to the names that they had when they were Gentiles? Or is the concern of a prohibition in this matter? Because it appears that he is still a Gentile and does not acknowledge God's Torah. Okay, let me see how I get back there we go. So, whoops, I'll go back to the share. I don't know, this thing is little.
Oh, you're sharing.
Yeah,
We
okay,
still
no,
see it.
I want share with little faces on the side. Do that. Where's the little faces on the side? I'm sorry. That's fine. But how do I get, oh, I have them across the, no, I don't have them across the top. I'm sorry. How do I do that? Share?
You are
This?
sharing. You just have to go back to the,
Yeah, no, but I want to
part.
see the faces.
Ah, you have to go back to
See,
your
now
Zoom.
I see you and I don't see what I'm sharing.
I don't think you can do both at the same time.
You can't, I see both at the same time.
Yeah,
And she
I
was seeing
did
it
the horsey
before.
both at the
Yeah.
same time. I'm sorry, I don't want to waste time with this. Okay, so we'll just be here and I've got these on the slide here, right? Okay, so what I did want to ask, and here's where people can kind of talk up.
Okay, so you didn't go to the next slide, right?
No, I didn't go to the next slide.
Okay, just making
Okay,
sure.
I'm on this slide and I've got like a number of questions about it, right? And among the questions I have, well, okay, I'm sorry, I threw myself off here.
It happens.
All right, first of all, what is the problem that's being raised here? Somebody?
Oh, that was the actual question. You're supposed to,
That's an
you can
actual
respond.
question. Yeah, what's the?
Well, there are two actual problems that I see. First of all, and this reminds me very much of the Jews who came to America and anglicized their names so that they would not be taken for Jews,
Right,
particularly in the business world or even in education. That there are two problems. One, the concern would be endangering Jews still in Christian lands
mhm,
who perhaps were hiding, and that if someone with a Jewish name appears, that might endanger them. Also, if it's a question of business, and that their Jewish name was found by the authorities, it could endanger whatever they owned back in the homeland, so that they might immediately have their property back home if it's managed by someone else confiscated.
right. Okay, so what you are doing is explaining why the question is being asked, right? That is why someone would want to use a Gentile name. But the question that I want, and actually the fact that they do this is, first of all, here's a bit of something that we can learn historically, that Jews who might have left these Christian lands, it's the Iberian Peninsula, and gone to live, in this case, the Ottoman Empire, where the Maharashtra is, that they maintain contact, whether with family, or they didn't sell or get rid of all their property and they have somebody who is doing business on their behalf. So we see that there. And that's an interesting point here. The question that I want to, or another question that I want to ask is, what is the halachic question? What problem? Why would it be wrong to use the Gentile name? What problem do you see with that? And if no one answers soon, then I'll say what the problems might be with that.
I think the problem might be that one might, if somebody's using a Christian name, then one might be suspected of backsliding.
Okay. All right. So
We have comments here. As our global Jewish community family have moved from country to country, both first and family names will be transformed to sound more like those of the predominant culture, not always because they were conversos. So that's another, but not exactly the question you're asking right now.
okay, so I'm gonna, rather than to, because we do have a certain limited time, I'm gonna point out the question itself actually points to, is there a concern of a prohibition in this matter? Could there be some prohibition in using a Gentile name? And then it explains why there might be a prohibition, because it appears that he is still a Gentile and does not acknowledge God's Torah. So I actually think that that combines more than one question, halachic question. I put a note, though, the question isn't posed about one person in particular, is it? It says, right? It says those forced conversos. So that might mean that it's some general question, maybe not even sent by a particular person. Maybe the Maharash Dam is raising it himself. Maybe another rabbi, but not a person who wants to do it. Maybe another rabbi has come across or has people come to him and ask what to do. But it certainly sounds like this isn't just one person who does this. So the problem raised about using a Gentile name, and I say what problem is absent but might be considered. Okay? There are a couple of problems that might be considered. One of them, well, appearing to be a Gentile is mentioned in a sense, but the problem not considered, is it a form of deception? Deception in Hebrew we would call hona'ah, deception. It's not really telling a falsehood, although we have in Exodus chapter 23, verse 7, midvar sheker tilchak, which is translated, let's say in the King James, as keep far from a false matter, but it is usually explained as having to do with false testimony, false charges, and not necessarily telling a lie. So it really has to do with deception. Is there a problem of deception by pretending you're Christian? And lastly, I have here, is there a prohibition to have a Gentile name? Is that the concern in the question? Before we go to the tour, which is my halachic background for this, this is actually the case where I have very little halachic background. What do you think? Do you think there's a prohibition to use a Christian name when you consider all of us who were not born in Israel, and so many of us have names that are not Jewish names, or what we consider Jewish names, whatever that means? I think that's one of the questions here. What defines a Jewish name? So do you think there's a prohibition? Is it really something bad we're doing if we use, I don't want to call out somebody in their name, but people who have names that are, we could go down the list of names. Do you think that there's something problematic halachically in using a Christian name? I mean, I don't know if I noticed anyone with the name Paul, so I'll just pick Paul. I know a lot of Jews, even some very observant ones, who have the name Paul. And I view Paul as a particularly Christian name. So is there some halachic problem with that? Thoughts?
Well, there's a comment here, I think expanding upon your question, what's the more important halachic imperative? To not deceive or to preserve our lives and the lives of our children?
Okay, that's a great question. Okay. For Americans who use the name Paul, are they actually preserving their lives and the lives of their children? Probably not. For these people, well, so this is one of the issues that comes up even in the response. The person that's being asked about, or people, they're not in Spain or Portugal. They are now in a very safe place. They're not in danger. Maybe their family is in danger. Maybe somebody else is in danger, or maybe, to put it in a kind of materialistic way, their property is in danger. And then you could say, well, how much is it worth to do this in order to protect your property? So I see another comment, using a Christian name might be looked upon as starting a trend toward assimilation. There's definitely truth to that. Or might be perceived as that. Let's go back to this. Share. No? Now, where'd the share go? Share, share.
Should be someplace.
Why is it not sharing?
Oh, we see it.
You do? I
Yeah,
don't.
we see it.
Okay.
You're on the tour Yoredea.
Okay, great. So how do I get rid of this video? I don't know. I'm finding that this is a little not always.
Sorry.
No, maybe I should have stuck to my iPad. Okay. All right. So you see it?
We see the tour Yoredea, yeah.
Okay. So that's what we're up to. The tour about that, so. Okay, so like I said, in this particular question, this chapter, there's very little halakhic background in comparison, and that's one of the reasons I selected to present it, because we can get something basic. The beginning part of this is something that probably everyone is familiar with. The fact that there are 3 transgressions that no matter what we say in Hebrew, yehareg val yavo, you should not transgress these. You should be put to death if necessary. So I'll read that quickly. For all transgressions, with the exception of pagan worship, forbidden sexual relationships, and murder, if they say to a Jewish person to transgress them, or he will be killed. If he is in private, if he wants, he can transgress and not be killed. And if he wants to be stringent with himself and be killed, he is permitted. That's the Tosfot's view, which the Tur put here. Rambam does not have that view. Rambam says you're not allowed to have yourself killed if you don't have to be killed. In what situation are these things said? When the Gentile intends to cause him to transgress his religion. But if the Gentile only intends it for his own benefit, he should transgress and not be killed. But in a time of persecution, even for merely a custom, and this I underline because this is one of the points that we can consider in this question, even for merely a custom that they practice, if the Gentiles come to demand of him to transgress it, he should be killed and not transgress. This is a time of persecution, certainly in Spain and Portugal. Is using a Christian name, a Gentile name, in this case it's Christians. Is that somehow transgression of a Jewish custom? And then he continues, however, for pagan worship, forbidden sexual relations, and murder, even in private, he should be killed and not transgress. And even if the Gentile does not intend to cause him to transgress his religion, but only for his own benefit. Now we get to another very important point for the response to this question. A person is prohibited to say that he is a Gentile so that they will not kill him. Because by saying he is Gentile, he thereby admits to their faith and denies the fundamental principle of God. So we're raising 2 questions here from the Tur's halachic material. And yet we know how much Jews use names that are not what we would call Jewish names. So how do I move on to the next one?
If you want, while you're doing that, there are some comments here that are also building upon it. I think there's a difference between Paul and Jesus, or Jesus, or Christina and Christian. I think that was just a comment. But also and I think it's built on what you were just saying, in about 1940, my mother was told by an employment agency that she would have plenty of job offers if she changed her name from Silverman, and she refused. So that kind of ties into what you were saying about the, it's your parnasa, right? It's what you do for a living. It's what you can earn.
That's right. Yeah.
But
okay. Interesting point. Okay.
But then you have the other side where Sherry says, just because someone claims to be Gentile does not express what's in his heart. And I think you're going to be talking about that. So
actually he does, but I don't quite get to that section because again, we have limited time. So the question I have here, what do you say? Does using a Gentile name fall under either the category of transgressing a Jewish custom in a time of persecution, or the category of saying that he's a Gentile? Yes? No? Does it? It's actually tricky, right? It's pretty tricky. But we're gonna go ahead. This is being shared. The shared, you see this?
But Gentile names?
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. It's a little bit. It would be nice. Maybe I should just have to. I don't know. I think I would design Zoom differently. All right. So the truth is the response is quite long. It's actually impressively long in a way, considering how simple the question might be, or seems to be. You know, can I or can I not use this Christian name? Or can someone use it or not? The Maharashtra spends a lot of time presenting a number of anecdotes and cases in the Talmud where people, sometimes Talmidei Chachamim, the sages themselves, or people who were, let's say, Talmidei Chachamim, the students of the sages, would deceive in some way. They would claim certain, certain things about themselves. In one case, it's a fascinating anecdote, really, the idea of saying, I serve the fire, which has to do with the Zoroastrian temple. And that was in order to not pay certain taxes. Now, you need to really delve into the question and the response and the notes there to see what the questions, what the issues might be as far as integrity, as far as is it okay or not okay to do this. But he brings up a number of various cases where there might be some deception that is used and discusses the issue of deception. But he gets to something that is, in a sense, the crux of the matter. And this way I can focus on a small part of the response that is towards the end, after all of that discussion about various situations of deception. He gets to something very basic. Are Gentile names prohibited? And he says, but Gentile names are not prohibited to Jews. Proof of this is found in what we say in Gittin, that's the tractate about writs of divorce, chapter 1, 11b is the page or pagination in the Vilna Talmud. And what I haven't read here in the book is in a different font. And again, to avoid so many quotation marks, it's a way to separate out what is a quote from the Talmud. So this is in the Talmud. Writs of divorce that come from overseas and are signed by witnesses, even though the names on them are like Gentile names, are valid, because the names of the majority of Jews outside of the land of Israel are like Gentile names. And also in the land of Israel, the names were like the names of Gentiles. Now this is his own text, right back in the black font, because there is no difference between the land of Israel and outside of the land of Israel other than majority. In other words, the Talmud says the names of the majority of Jews outside the land of Israel. And in the land of Israel is not necessarily the majority. And he learns that from Rashi's commentary there, who says there really isn't a difference between the land of Israel and outside, except that in the land of Israel, it's not the majority. Do not say that Jews use only names that are common to both Jews and Gentiles, but not names that are indubitably Gentile. Because here from the words of the Rosh is actually the father of the Tur, right, who you saw the citation before, it can be clearly learned that Jews were called names that are indubitably Gentile, as he wrote. Now, this is the quotation mark is because this is taken from the Rosh, but the Rosh is first citing the Talmud. And he is citing where it says in the Talmud, he said to him, again, talking about writs of divorce, the get, that is being sent from some place to a woman. We received no writ of divorce other than one that was signed by Lucius and Gaius, and we declared it valid, because Jews with those names are not common. So you think if they're not common for Jews, why would you think it's a Jewish people who signed the writ of divorce? And of course, if it's not Jews who signed the writ of divorce, that's not a kosher get. But the Rosh says, certainly the messenger who brought the writ to the woman did not err in having people like this sign, whose names are like those of Gentiles, until he investigated and scrutinized them, and he knew that they were Jews, and then he had them signed. So in other words, the witnesses were checked carefully. Because your name is Paul, sorry if there is anybody here with the name Paul, I picked that out. Jesus, because your name is Jesus, we want to be sure you're Jewish. Here we see, now we're back to the Maharashtam's words. He ended the quote from the Rosh. We see explicitly that a Jew who calls himself by an indubitably Gentile name is a proper Jew who can validly sign a writ of divorce. And if so, we can say, according to this, in our case also, it is certainly permitted. All this seems, in my humble opinion, to be unnecessary, other than for the comfort of the matter, to appease the questioner's mind. But the truth is that everything that the authorities of blessed memory prohibit and are stringent about is only that a person should not change himself in the presence of Gentiles. So now we're getting to another important point. The person who's writing this letter, he's not in the presence of Gentiles, he's far away in the Ottoman lands, and he's sending with a messenger to a letter to somebody who is in a Gentile country, so that they would not think he is a Gentile and point to him and say, so-and-so is a Gentile. And there is, in such behavior, profanation of God's name. But regarding the case that he writes what he needs to, and then signs his name with a Gentile name, and he who is the recipient of the letter knows certainly that he is a Jew. In other words, the person receiving it knows exactly who he is. And others who see the letter think that this property is not from a Jew, but a Gentile, and they do not know the man himself. All this, and also it is not a public matter that one could say there's a profanation of God's name. God forbid. It is permitted. I wrote what seems to me, in my humble opinion. So that is the section that I picked out, and not doing too bad, I guess, time-wise. I have a number of conclusions, which somehow, because I want to see faces here. So according to Rabbi Samuel de Medina's argument, and based on the source text he cited, we can conclude, right? Is there a prohibition on using a Gentile name? And the answer is no. Right? There isn't a prohibition. In fact, according to the Talmud, it's commonly done. So here's the deeper question. Is there such a thing as a Gentile name? The Talmud uses those terms, Gentile names and Jewish names. So what makes a Gentile name? Is it just that it's more commonly used by Gentiles? Are Jewish names names that have to be, I don't know, in Hebrew, from the Bible? Ideas? What makes a Jewish name? I see Jack instead of Jacob can be a survival mechanism if you're surrounded by Christian nationalists in the present day. Yeah, that's true.
I'm just going to say that just in case people now want to join and participate, I'm going to invite you again as panelists. So you can continue to put into the chat, but just in case somebody decided. There are some chat messages also that
we managed, we skipped or didn't call out. Well, in the chat, I see somebody commenting about in the Holocaust where it's sometimes necessary. Well, there absolutely, there it really was a matter of saving one's life. Well,
right, and then there's a difference between saving a life and saving Judaism.
Yes,
so that's...
and your children's lives. Well, this is maybe for a different discussion, but if you go back to the time of the Ashkenazi communities and the time of the Crusaders, those people sacrificed their lives, and I'm one of those people who thinks it was a mistake to do so. I think it is better to compromise, even if it's a compromise. And of course, historically, we can look at the results of what happened after the expulsion from Spain and Portugal. There are people who are descendants and know they're descendants or find out they're descendants. And on the other hand, if you sacrificed your life, I mean, some even killed their own children, well, then you don't have anyone surviving. So like you said, the survival. I see what is a Jewish name? Only the names of those who were at Mount Sinai. Well, Moshe is not necessarily, I mean, they may mean Hamayim Mishitihu, but it's not really clear that it's a Jewish name. So that's a pretty interesting thing. to say.
And just
You'd have to look at those names, but I don't know what it, yeah, it's an interesting question. My last question that I have, how far back in time were people's names seen as exclusively Jewish or not? There are a number of references in the chapter, in the book, about Jewish names in the United States. Okay, when people wanted to have less Jewish sounding names. And I think that really talks a lot about what makes exclusively Jewish names. A lot of immigrants who came to the United States picked names that they thought, like my grandfather, who came in the 1920s. His name was Chaim. And it was either he himself or he had an uncle, or no, he was an older brother who was already in the States, or some relative who encouraged him, or maybe at Ellis Island. But he took the name Hyman instead of Chaim. Well, these days, and for a long time later, the name Hyman would right away be seen as a Jewish name anyway. People took the name Irving. But then later, Irving became clearly a Jewish name. It's not a Jewish name. But a lot of those names, because Jews took them, became associated with Jews anyway. Alexander's a very interesting one. Alexander's an interesting one because that's used in the Talmud, and because Alexander in Talmudic sources was considered in some ways to be a positive Gentile. And so that's okay.
I think Diane agrees with you.
Okay. Sender is not a Yiddish name. Right? Sender's a Yiddish name. Yiddish names like Wolf, right? Zev Wolf. So many people had Hebrew and Yiddish, right? So they had
Dove Bear.
Yeah, Dove Bear, right? All right. Well, my last question.
Well, before you get to that, Diane, I think expanded on something you said. If one permits himself to be killed, how does that square with our obligation to preserve life, which is what you were talking about before, I think.
And yes, well, so that's B'chai Bahem, but that's, you saw what the tour has. I cited it from the tour because the Maharashtam cites it from the tour, but we find it in Rambam and we find it based on the Talmud. Those transgressions that you're not allowed to transgress. And when it is a time of persecution, so you're supposed to allow yourself to be killed. In other words, there is a tension between the Chai Bahem, and in other words, you should live by them, versus when should you not transgress. In the case of the Crusaders, it was forced conversion to Christianity that happened in certain Jewish communities, and Jews seemingly overwhelmingly chose not to convert. On the other hand, in the case of forced conversion particularly in Portugal, because in Portugal, they were blocked from leaving. And so there you are, suddenly you're told, you thought you could leave, and then you're blocked and you're forced to convert. And many people, I don't know that we'll ever have I've seen ranges of numbers, but many chose to convert with the intent, it will pass, I will return. I have seen people criticize this. In fact, there are some people who were historians who criticized this. I'm not going to get into that now. Looking at it, yeah, they just, were willing to convert rather than to be martyrs. And I myself, I think I would have done like that. I would have said, sure, convert me, sprinkle the water. I would say I believe, and I don't have to really believe. And I can hope, as happened with many, that they were able to, just like in this question, they were former conversos, and then they left. And so that's what I would hope I could do. I think it's the right way to go because, as you said, then you can preserve life. But the strict halakha tells you otherwise. I think it's a good thing some people simply could not abide by that it was just too tough. And Rambam makes it very clear, Maimonides, that if you transgressed and didn't let yourself be killed, you're not held accountable by any Jewish court of law, because it's considered, that's why they're called anusim, forced ones. They were forced to do. And so, yeah, we'll just leave it as, yeah, maybe there is ideal or not ideal. Life isn't ideal. The challenges we face are not ideal. Oh, I see again, Cyrus after Cyrus the Great.
I don't know anybody named Koresh or Cyrus, do you?
Koresh in Hebrew, I think I've heard of or met or come across some British Jews who hadn't, I don't know what their Hebrew name was, that might have had Cyrus in English.
Interesting.
Koresh, I have not come across anybody with the name Koresh, but times in the far past was there. I don't know. I'm not an expert on names. Cyrus Gordon. Oh, Cyrus Jordan.
No, Cyrus Gordon, he was a great professor at Brandeis University. His Hebrew name was Koresh also.
It was.
Really? Thank you.
Really? Very cool. Nice. Nice. Okay, well, actually, so my material is concluded, and I'm open to questions, comments.
Oh, Dr. Karam says that there are some Persian Jews also named Cyrus.
Cyrus. That I can believe. Where did I just see something of Persians named Cyrus? I did see something, but yes, that I can certainly believe. I think there are Persian non-Jews named Cyrus. Indigenous people conceded to converting in order to survive. Yes, that is true.
It might be also Zoroastrians named Cyrus, since that was their king. So, but that's a totally different topic. Sorry, I don't know why I brought that up. But the concept of, so we were talking at the beginning, or people were bringing up topics at the beginning about their family names or people who changed them or didn't change them. So your last question here, which you didn't ask, but what is your response now about changing about your own name? Or so I don't know if anybody here wants to respond to that.
Yeah, that's my final question. Does it make you feel any different about your own name? I think that I put that as a question for thought. I don't know that I need people to come and say, oh, I've always hated my name and now I love my name. But yeah, it definitely can give thought. Some scholars in Maimonides or have converted to Islam. Yes, I'm aware of that.
Right, and he also wrote the Geret Hashmad, right? So he said that people could convert.
The Muslims that were in Spain before he went to Egypt were the Almohads, and they were extreme, but extreme fanatics. And so it was pretty tough there. And yes, I know that scholars say that, and I think I'm pretty convinced that it's probably so, that his intent was to get out as soon as he could. Surname is Katz. Well, Katz is
It's a name.
Kohen, right?
Kohen Sedek.
Yes.
Oh, and here, see, that's an interesting concept also when you talk about, it's particularly the way some of the North Africans or Middle Easterners name after, and they've had it already in the for generations in the family. So Janine, and that is, I'm assuming she's also from there with her last name Hakim, and she says because it's her name, or I'm assuming, is inherited from ancestors, and so she honors them by being named after them. So it's her grandmother's name, which was her grandmother's name. So it's already going back generations.
Well, the name Hakim is a very old name that is both in the Jewish world and I mean, it's very similar to the same word in Arabic and the same word in Aramaic. Hakim was somebody who was perhaps a physician or someone related to those types of professions. So that is an ancient name.
Right, and the Sephardim are often called Chacham instead of a rabbi.
Right.
Okay. Well, I think this definitely was food for thought. I really appreciate it. There is a lot of food for thought in the book, I have to let you know. So I encourage you all to read it and bring back, respond to me. Let's say we really want to discuss this responsa, and then hopefully Dr. Koren will respond and say, great, let's do another session. Because I have to tell you that I got a lot out of the book itself, and it raised a lot of thoughts in my head. So I hope it raises it in yours. We hope to see you in our upcoming programs as well. As always, we have the Kesher Book Talks, and we have Jeannie Milgram and Georgina talking about the Certificate of Sephardic Ancestry coming up. So there are a lot of good things. We'll send it out, obviously, with the forwarding email, and please be in touch. Thank you again, Dr. Koren.
Dora,
Okay, thank everybody for
put the name of the book. Tell us the name of the book again.
Yes,
yeah,
you
it's
want to put it,
Responsa in a Historical Context.
and you'll also get it in the follow-up email, but
Yeah, I don't know if it comes clear on the screen. A view of post-expulsion Spanish Portuguese Jewish communities through 16th and 17th century. Responsa, Academic Studies Press. So if you look Academic Studies Press, my name, you'll find it, but I hope Drora can send that to people as well.
yep, and you also, if you want to wait, you'll get the 20% off coupon in the follow-up email. So
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yes, I really thank everybody for coming. And as far as wanting another such after the summer, because I'm going to be away for the summer.
well, it'll
So
take
you
people a
can take
while to read the
summer
book
break.
anyway.
That's right. You can beach reading. This book is not what I would call beach reading, but you can. Yeah. Okay.
Thank
But
you
you can
all. Have a
read over
wonderful
the
rest of the
summer,
day.
and if there's interest, sure, I'd be delighted.